I didn't come to that office looking for her, but the first time our eyes met across the conference room, the air felt thicker, heavier with something unspoken. My hands gripped the edge of the table, the cool glass under my palms, grounding me as her voice cut through the room, steady and commanding. She was introducing the new project, her words precise, but in that moment, everything narrowed to the way her gaze lingered just a second too long. 6 months in, and the silence between us had grown into a weight I couldn't ignore anymore. It pressed on my chest during meetings, followed me home in the quiet of my apartment. That weight started small, in the shared spaces where everything began. The office hummed with fluorescent lights and the faint scent of coffee grounds, but near her desk, it always felt quieter, more charged. I'd pass by on my way to the copier, catching the faint rustle of papers under her hands, the way she leaned into her work like it was an extension of her body. She was Elena, the department head, with years of climbing ladders I was just starting to eye. Her office door stayed open most days, inviting questions from the team, but I found excuses to stop there more than most. At first, it was legitimate, clarifying a report, double-checking a deadline. Her responses came even-keeled, her eyes meeting mine without flourish. But something in the set of her jaw, the slight tilt of her head, made the space between us feel smaller. I'd linger after meetings, watching her sort papers, her fingers precise on the edges, calluses from years of leading showing in every movement. The conference room would empty out, chairs scraping back, voices fading down the hall, but I'd hang by the window, pretending to review notes. She'd stack files methodically, her sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked by faint scars from some past life, maybe hiking, maybe something rougher. One time, as the last colleague left, she looked up and said, "You always stay to the end. Something on your mind?" My throat tightened, the air conditioning whispering cold across my skin. "Just making sure I got it all," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded, but her eyes held mine a beat longer, and the room's sterile quiet amplified the thud in my chest. Conversations started professional, project updates, deadlines, but her questions lingered, pulling at the edges of my guarded answers. "What do you do when you're not buried in spreadsheets?" she'd ask one afternoon, leaning back in her chair, the leather creaking softly. I hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of my notebook. "Hikes, mostly. Trails that wind through the woods, where the ground's uneven underfoot." She smiled faintly, the first real crack in her professional mask. "Sounds grounding. I used to do that before the city swallowed me." Her words hung there, simple, but they shifted something, the way the light from the window caught the lines around her eyes, tired but alive. I nodded, excusing myself, but as I walked away, the hallway felt longer, the echo of my steps louder against the pull I felt toward her door. Days blurred into weeks, the office's rhythm a constant backdrop. Phones buzzing, keyboards clacking, the occasional laugh from the break room. But in those shared spaces, the elevator rides where we'd nod silently, the water cooler chats that stretched past polite, tension built like silt settling in still water. I'd catch myself watching her during team huddles, the way her hand gestured firmly, commanding attention without raising her voice. She noticed once, her gaze flicking to me mid-sentence, and I looked away, heat rising in my cheeks, the cool draft from the vents doing nothing to ease it. It was subtle, these moments, but they accumulated, weighing on me like the stack of reports on my desk. One late evening, alone in the break room, our hands brushed, reaching for the same mug, and the jolt ran up my arm like static in dry air. The room was dim, overhead lights off, just the glow from the vending machine casting shadows on the counters. I'd stayed to finish a presentation, the building emptying around me, and there she was, pouring coffee, her coat draped over a chair. "Sleepless night ahead?" she asked, her voice low in the quiet. "Always," I said, reaching for the mug at the same instant she did. Our fingers touched, warm skin against ceramic, and time stretched. The jolt spread not just from the contact, but from the way neither of us moved right away. My heart thudded against my ribs, the silence stretching as neither of us pulled away first. I could smell her shampoo, faint cedar mixed with the office's lingering ink scent. She let go slowly, her eyes searching mine in the low light. "Careful," she murmured, not about the mug. I stepped back, gripping the handle tighter, the warmth seeping into my palm. We drank in silence after that, the clock ticking on the wall, but the air hummed with what wasn't said. As I left, her "good night" followed me down the hall, soft but insistent, echoing in my ears long after the door clicked shut. I told myself it was nothing, just the exhaustion of long hours, but the pull felt too real, too insistent. Nights in my small apartment, the city lights filtering through blinds, I'd replay that touch, the brief pressure of her fingers, the way her breath had steadied after. Was it mutual? Or just my mind, clouded by the grind, weaving threads where there were none? The office handbook sat on my shelf, its pages on conduct crisp and unyielding. No relationships that crossed lines of authority. But in the shared spaces, those rules blurred at the edges, tempting me closer. I'd wake with her voice in my head, commanding, yet warm, and wonder how long I could keep the silence. Those moments built slowly, turning routine into something that kept me awake at night. Emails turned personal after hours. Her words, careful but warm, asking about my weekend hikes, the grit of trails under my boots. I checked my phone in the dim light of my kitchen, the screen glow cutting through the evening quiet, and there it would be. A message from Elena, time-stamped late, after the office had gone dark. Those trails sound like they clear the head. Which one next? Simple at first, tied to our earlier chat, but they came more often, slipping past work talk into the edges of life. I'd type back, fingers hesitant on the keys, describing the crunch of leaves underfoot, the way sweat beaded on my skin in the uphill stretches. Her replies lingered too, sharing a memory of her own, a forgotten path near the coast, salt air clinging to everything. It felt safe, this distance through words, but each one pulled the thread tighter, the screen warm in my hand as I read them again before sleep. In boardrooms, her gaze would find mine during presentations, a subtle nod that made the room's sterile air feel warmer, almost suffocating. The long table gleamed under overhead lights, voices droning through slides, but when I'd stand to report, her eyes would lock on, steady from the head of the room. Not staring, just present. A quiet acknowledgement amid the projections and charts. Once, mid-sentence on quarterly figures, she nodded, the motion small but direct, and heat flushed my neck, the projector fan whirring louder in my ears. The air conditioner hummed, pushing cool drafts across my arms, but it did nothing against the way her attention settled on me like a hand on my shoulder. After, as the team filed out, she'd linger by the door, coffee in hand, murmuring, "Solid work today." Her voice low, meant for me alone, and I'd nod, throat dry, the echo of footsteps fading down the hall. I froze during a team dinner, her knee pressing against mine under the table, accidental at first, then not moving away. The restaurant buzzed with clinking glasses and overlapping chatter. The team scattered around a long wooden table, plates of pasta steaming in the low light. We sat side by side, assigned seats for team building, her chair close enough that our elbows brushed when reaching for bread. Then it happened. Her knee nudged mine as she shifted, the fabric of her slacks rough against my bare leg under the skirt. I tensed, fork pausing midair, the warmth seeping through, steady and unyielding. No one noticed, lost in stories of deadlines and weekend plans, but the contact held, a silent pressure that made my pulse quicken. I glanced her way, but she faced forward, laughing at a colleague's joke, her profile sharp in the candle flicker. When she finally moved, it was slow, deliberate, leaving a ghost of heat that followed me through the rest of the meal. Outside, in the cool night air, as we waited for cabs, her hand grazed my back, brief, guiding, and I stepped away, the city's hum drowning my uneven breath. The office policy loomed in my mind, printed in bold on every handbook: fraternization forbidden, especially with power imbalances like ours. I'd pull the digital copy up on quiet afternoons, scrolling through the clauses, the words stark against the screen. Relationships between supervisors and reports could lead to termination, investigations, the end of paths I'd carved carefully. Elena held the keys to promotions, references, the future I'd mapped out since starting here. One wrong step, and it all crumbled. The steady paycheck, the respect earned inch by inch, the stability I'd fought for after years of drifting. Yet, in the moments that piled up, the policy felt like a distant wall, cracking under the weight of what simmered between us. I'd close the file, heart thudding, and return to my desk. The keyboard clicks a rhythm to push it down. But it lingered, a shadow in the fluorescent glow, reminding me of the line we danced along. Nights alone, I'd replay her laugh, low and unguarded, wondering if she felt the same shift in the silence between us. In my apartment, the walls thin against neighbor noise, I'd lie on the bed, sheets cool against my skin, her voice echoing from some forgotten meeting. That laugh, rare, slipping out during a casual aside, warm like gravel under tires on a back road. Did it mean nothing to her? Just a release in the grind? Or did she replay our exchanges too? The brush of knees, the late emails. I'd turn toward the window, city lights blurring, and feel the ache settle in my chest, heavy as unpacked boxes from my last move. Sleep came slow, her face surfacing in the dark, and I'd wonder how long the silence could hold before it broke. My thoughts clouded, torn between ambition and this growing ache that threatened everything I'd built. Mornings brought clarity. The commutes jostle, shaking off the haze, but by midday, doubt crept back. The promotion I eyed, now tangled with her approval. What if pursuit meant ruin? The job market's grit, starting over, explanations to friends who saw only the career climb. Yet ignoring it felt like denial. The pull, insistent, like roots pushing through concrete. I'd stare at my monitor, lines of data blurring, and feel the divide widen inside me. Ambition whispered, "Stay safe." The ache urged closer, reckless. In the quiet lulls, I'd choose neither, just existing in the tension, waiting for the next thread to pull. The crisis came on a night when work blurred into something more urgent, forcing the line to blur. The phone rang at midnight, pulling me from a shallow sleep, the screen lighting up my bedside table with her name. Elena's voice came through rough with fatigue, edged by the project's deadline that had dragged into chaos. "I need you," she said, simple words that landed heavy in the quiet of my room. Rain hammered the window, mirroring the thud in my chest as I sat up, sheets tangling around my legs. The storm had rolled in sudden, wind rattling the panes, and her tone carried the same urgency, frayed at the edges. Files were missing, she explained, critical ones for the morning pitch, and no one else was reachable. I pulled on a jacket, the fabric damp from the hallway humidity, and grabbed my keys. The drive through slick streets, a blur of wipers and headlights. By the time I reached the office building, the lot was empty, puddles reflecting the security lights in fractured silver. The elevator hummed upward, cold air seeping through the doors, and I wondered if this was just work or the pull finally demanding more. She needed help with files, but as I arrived at her empty office, the rain-slicked windows reflected us, close in the dim light. The door stood ajar, a wedge of lamplight spilling into the hall, and inside, Elena hunched over her desk, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Her hair fell loose, damp strands clinging to her neck from the dash inside, and she looked up as I entered, relief flickering in her eyes. "Thanks for coming," she murmured, gesturing to the chair beside her, the leather still warm from her earlier sit. The office felt smaller at night, walls pressing in with the storm's roar outside, thunder rumbling distant. We started sorting, screens glowing blue in the low light. Her mouse clicked sharp against the pattern on glass. I pulled up backups on my laptop, cables snaking across the desk, our arms close enough to feel the shared heat. The building creaked under the wind, empty halls silent beyond, And in that isolation, the professional veil thinned, just a fraction. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion etching lines deeper, and I caught the faint scent of her skin, clean soap mixed with rain. We worked side by side, shoulders brushing, the scent of wet wool from her coat mixing with the dry office air. Hours slipped by, the clock's red digits ticking past 1, then 2, our focus narrowing to the data streams and file paths. Her shoulder nudged mine as she leaned to point at the screen, the wool of her coat rough against my sleeve, dampness seeping through. I shifted, but the contact lingered, a steady pressure that sent warmth spreading up my arm. The air in the office stayed stale, recycled, and cool, but close to her, it warmed, carrying the earthy note of wet fabric and something deeper, like cedar from her hair. Thunder cracked closer, lights flickering once, and she steadied her hand on the desk, fingers grazing mine in the jolt. We paused, breaths sinking in the sudden quiet, and I felt the brush again, deliberate this time, her skin soft despite the calluses. No words, just the rain's steady drum, and the way our movements synced, pulling files, cross-checking, bodies aligned in the narrow space. Fatigue blurred the edges, making the touches feel inevitable, the storm outside echoing the one building inside me. Her hand covered mine on the keyboard, pausing us both, and in that touch, the guarded walls cracked just enough. It happened, mid-search, my fingers hovering over keys, hers sliding over to stop me, warm and firm. The screen froze on a half-loaded document, cursor blinking, but neither of us moved. Her palm pressed down, thumb tracing a light circle on my knuckle, and heat flooded my veins, sharp as the lightning outside. I looked up, her face inches away, eyes dark in the lamplight, searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. The keyboard clicked faintly under our weight, but the world narrowed to that point of contact, skin to skin, pulse thrumming through. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers laced lightly with mine, the calluses rough against my smoother skin. In that moment, the files, the deadline, the storm, all faded, leaving only the crack in the silence we'd both maintained. My heart hammered, loud in my ears, and I saw it mirrored in her, the slight widen of her eyes, the part of her lips. "I've been waiting to say this," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear, the words hanging heavy like the rain outside. She leaned closer, voice barely above the storm's murmur, her free hand rising to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch lingered there, fingertips trailing down my jaw, light as a secret finally spoken. "I love you," she said, the words simple, raw, cutting through the air like thunder. Not the careful boss, not the professional nod across the room. This was her, unguarded, voice trembling at the edges. The rain sheeted down the window, blurring the city lights beyond, and her eyes held no retreat. Just the weight of months, unspoken. I felt it land, heavy in my chest, mixing fear with a rush I'd denied too long. Her wool coat brushed my arm again, damp and real, grounding the confession in the now. The office lamp cast shadows across her face, highlighting the vulnerability she'd hidden so well. I pulled back, heart slamming, the risk of it all, the job, the reputation, flooding in like cold water. My chair scraped as I shifted, hand slipping from hers, the sudden space between us chilling the air. The handbook flashed in my mind, bold letters on consequences, investigations, dismissals, the unraveling of careers built on trust. She was my superior, the one signing my reviews, and this, us, could end it all. Whispers turning to reports, doors closing forever. My reputation, hard won in a field that scrutinized every step, especially for women like us, hung by this thread. I stood pacing to the window, rain blurring my reflection, chest tight with the slam of my pulse. What if someone found out? Late nights excused his work, but eyes always watching, judgments sharp as glass. The storm raged, wind howling, and I turned back to her, seeing the fear echo in her tightened jaw. Everything I'd built, stability, respect, teetered on this edge, cold reality, dousing the warmth her words had sparked. But her eyes held mine, full of the same fear and hope I'd been carrying alone. She rose slowly, closing the gap, her hand reaching out but stopping short, palm open in the space between. In her gaze, I saw it all mirrored, the late-night replays, the stolen glances, the ache that had grown in silence. No more pretending it was one-sided. Her hope shone through the fear, steady as the rain's rhythm. The office felt vast, yet intimate, storm sounds fading to background, leaving us in this fragile truth. I stepped forward, fingers brushing hers again, the contact electric, shared now. We stood there, breaths mingling, the confession settling like silt after a flood. What followed was a secret we both guarded, navigating the thrill and the terror of stolen moments. Our first kiss happened in the parking garage, shadows hiding us as her lips met mine, soft but desperate, tasting of coffee and restraint. The confession from that stormy night lingered like aftershocks, pulling us back to the office the next day with eyes averted and words clipped. But 2 days later, as the work week ground on, she texted, "Meet me after shift." I waited by my car, the concrete levels echoing with distant engines, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead in the dim space. She appeared from the stairwell, coat slung over her arm, steps quick until she reached me, then slowing as if the air thickened. No words at first, just her hand rising to my cheek, thumb tracing the line of my jaw, rough from the day's chill. I leaned in, heart thudding against the cold metal of the car door behind me, and her lips found mine. Soft at the edges, but urgent underneath, the taste of her morning coffee faint, mixed with the mint she chewed to steady nerves. Her restraint cracked in that press, tongue brushing mine briefly, then pulling back as if burned. Shadows from the pillars cloaked us, tires squealing far below, but in that pocket of dark, the world narrowed to her breath on my skin, warm and ragged. She broke away first, forehead resting against mine, her fingers tightening in my collar. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but her body stayed close, contradicting the words. The garage's damp air clung to us, oil and exhaust faint, but her scent overrode it, cedar and wool, grounding me as my knees weakened. I nodded, but pulled her back, the kiss deepening this time, desperate hands finding her waist, the fabric of her blouse thin under my palms. When we parted, her eyes searched mine, full of the same storm we'd weathered, now shared. The elevator dinged distant, and we stepped apart, the space between us sudden and cold. After that, meetings became minefields, her voice steady in front of the team, but her foot tapping mine under the table, a silent code. The conference room filled with the usual hum, slides clicking, voices overlapping on metrics and timelines. Elena sat at the head, posture straight, outlining next quarter's goals with that commanding tone that filled the space. I'd focus on my notes, pen scratching paper. But then it came, her foot, shoeless under the tablecloth, nudging my ankle. Light at first, like testing water, then pressing firm, the sole of her stockinged foot sliding along my calf. Heat rose in my face, but I kept my gaze forward, nodding at her points as if discussing budgets, not the secret rhythm building below. The team droned on, oblivious, coffee cups clinking, but each tap sent a jolt up my leg, her code clear. I'm here. Once, during a lull, her toe traced my instep, deliberate, and I gripped the table edge, the wood cool under my fingers. She didn't falter above, voice even as she assigned tasks, but her eyes flicked to mine once. Brief, loaded. After, as chairs pushed back, she'd linger by the projector, murmuring adjustments to my report, her hand brushing my sleeve. Accidental to others, electric to me. The room emptied, leaving the scent of dry erase markers and her faint perfume. The minefield disarmed for now, but always waiting. Weekends blurred into texts, her inviting me to her place under the guise of work, where the silence finally broke into shared breaths. Saturday mornings, my phone would light up, review the proposal, bring notes. I'd arrive at her brownstone, the door opening to warm light and the smell of fresh brew, files spread on her kitchen island like camouflage. We'd start there, papers shuffling, her pen marking margins, but soon the work faded, elbows touching as we leaned closer. One afternoon, sunlight slanting through blinds, she set her mug down and turned, pulling me from the stool into her arms. The silence broke then, not with words, but breaths mingling as our lips met again. Slower now, exploratory. Her apartment felt lived in, books stacked uneven, a throw blanket rumpled on the couch, contrasting the office's sterility. We moved to the living room, her guiding me down, the cushions soft under my back as she hovered, eyes questioning. I nodded, hands sliding up her arms, feeling the muscles tense, then yield. Shared breaths turned to gasps, her weight settling over me, careful but insistent, the world outside muted by thick curtains. Texts became our bridge, late-night edits, or quick consult, each one a pull toward her door, the guys thinning with every visit. Nights stretched, work forgotten on the table, bodies entwined on her bed, sheets twisting around us in the dark. The city hummed faint beyond the window, but here, in her space, the forbidden felt possible, breaths sinking in the quiet. I felt her hands in my hair, the way she clung like she was afraid I'd vanish, mirroring my own guarded intensity. In those moments, her fingers threaded through my strands, tugging gently, pulling me closer, as if anchoring against a tide. She'd hold on after, palm flat against my back, breath steadying against my neck, the cling revealing her fear, the job's shadow, the what-ifs. It mirrored mine, that guarded pull, my arms wrapping tight around her waist, nails digging slight into her shirt. We'd lie there, sweat cooling on skin, her heartbeat thudding steady under my ear, both of us silent but speaking through touch. Her intensity matched mine, eyes locking in the low light, no barriers left in those stolen hours. Yet even then, a guard lingered. Quick glances at the clock, the door, reminders of the world waiting outside. Yet, every morning back at the office, the weight returned. Her professional distance, a necessary armor against prying eyes. Monday light filtered through blinds, the elevator ride up a return to rolls, nods in passing, emails formal and clipped. She'd walk the floor, clipboard in hand, voice brisk in check-ins, but her eyes would soften just for me. A flicker before the mask snapped back. The distance ached, like withdrawal, her desk a barrier across the open space, colleagues milling between us. I'd catch her in the hall, shoulders brushing in feigned accident, but she'd step away quick, armor gleaming in her straight posture. Prying eyes everywhere, water cooler gossip, sidelong glances, and the weight settled heavy, pressing the thrill into secrecy. By lunch, the isolation gnawed, her empty chair at meetings a void, the professional shell hiding the woman I'd held hours before. The empathy in her touch made me ache for more, for a world where this wasn't forbidden. Even in fragments, a hand on my lower back during a file pass, brief but knowing, it carried understanding. Her thumb pressing just enough to say, "I see you." That empathy deepened the ache, her knowing my fears without words, the forbidden line a wall we both longed to tear down. In quiet drives home, I'd trace the ghost of her fingers, yearning for open days, no guises, just us. Her world, once so controlled, now cracked for this, and it made me want everything, hand in hand through doors, no shadows. The risks started small, whispers in the halls that grew into something we couldn't ignore. A colleague's sidelong glance during lunch made my stomach twist, the casual question about late nights with the boss landing like gravel underfoot. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual midday rush, trays clattering, voices overlapping in bursts of laughter and complaint. I sat with the team, fork pushing salad greens around my plate, the fluorescent lights casting a pallid glow on the plastic table. Sarah from accounting leaned in, her eyes narrowing just enough to unsettle, steam rising from her soup. "You two seem thick as thieves lately, those after-hours sessions paying off?" Her tone light, but the words scraped, rough against the smooth routine we'd built. I forced a laugh, short and brittle, the lettuce crunching under my teeth as I swallowed. "Just deadlines. You know how Elena is." She nodded, but the glance lingered, a shadow passing over her face, before she turned to her phone. My stomach knotted tighter, the air thick with the scent of reheated pasta and unspoken judgments. I pushed my tray away, appetite gone, the gravel of her question settling heavy in my gut. Outside the window, the city skyline loomed gray, mirroring the doubt creeping in. Was it paranoia, or had our careful steps left prints? The lunch dragged, every bite tasting of caution, the casual probe a first crack in the facade. We adapted, separate elevators, coded emails, but the isolation gnawed, her hand slipping from mine in empty hallways. Mornings shifted. I'd wait for the next car, watching her doors close from the lobby, the ding echoing like a barrier. Emails became puzzles. Project Alpha for our next meet, blue files for her place, innocuous to outsiders, loaded for us. But the distance wore thin, like fabric fraying at the seams. In the quiet corridors after hours, we'd risk a touch, fingers intertwining briefly, her palm warm and calloused against mine. Then she'd pull away, glancing over her shoulder, the slip leaving my skin cooling fast. The isolation built, a slow ache in my chest, the office's vastness amplifying every separation. I'd walk alone to my desk, the carpet muffling my steps, her absence a hollow echo. Nights at her apartment offered relief, bodies close on the couch, but dawn brought the return. Armor donned again. The gnawing deepened, questions unspoken. How long until the codes weren't enough? Her texts grew shorter, laced with worry, and I'd stare at the screen, thumb hovering, the isolation a weight, pulling us apart, even when near. Empty hallways mocked us, doors whispering shut, the hand slip a reminder of what we couldn't hold. One afternoon, alone in the supply room, her whisper against my neck carried the fear. What if they find out? The door clicked behind us, the narrow space shelves stacked with reams of paper and ink cartridges, the air dusty and close. I'd followed her in for supplies, hearts racing from the hall's exposure, her back to the door as she turned. She stepped close, breath ghosting my skin, her lips brushing my ear in the dim bulb's glow. The words trembled out, low and raw, her body pressing forward, seeking anchor. Fear laced them, sharp as the staple edges on the shelves. The what if a blade against our secret. I turned, arms wrapping her waist, pulling her flush, the thud of her pulse against my palm through her blouse. The room smelled of paper and faint toner, but her scent overrode, cedar sharp, skin warm. What if hung between us, but I held tighter, my cheek against her collarbone, feeling her breath hitch. The supply room felt like a confessional, walls pressing in. But her whisper cracked open the vulnerability we'd armored. We stayed like that, minutes stretching. The building's hum distant, her fear mirroring mine in the shared heat. When she pulled back, eyes dark, the question lingered, unanswered. But the hold said enough. My response was a fierce hold, the thud of her pulse against my palm reminding me why we risked it. Her heartbeat raced under my touch, steadying as I pressed closer, fingers splaying across her ribs, grounded me. That rhythm, alive, insistent, the reason behind every coded glance and slipped hand. We risked for this. The way her eyes softened in private, the empathy in her quiet nods during my stressed days. The hold tightened, my nails pressing light into fabric, pulling her against me until breaths synced. Dust motes danced in the light, but nothing else moved, just us in that fierce claim. Why? Because in her I found the mirror to my guarded heart, the one that saw through the ambition to the ache beneath them. The pulse slowed, but the reminder stayed, fueling the fire against the fear's chill. We broke apart only when footsteps echoed outside, the hold a promise etched in skin. The company's holiday party loomed, a test of our control amid forced proximity and too much wine. Invitations landed in inboxes, the email bright with cheer, cocktails, dancing, the annual facade of unity. The venue, a downtown ballroom, chandeliers and open bar, colleagues mingling under forced festivity. Proximity unavoidable, tables round, dances encouraged, Elena's speech to kick it off. Wine would flow, loosening tongues, eyes sharper in the low light, every laugh a potential slip. I'd practiced smiles in the mirror, the dress clinging too close, wondering how to navigate her nearness without touch. Control tested, her hand on a glass, inches from mine, a toast where gazes locked too long. The party felt like a minefield dressed in tinsel, the air already thick with anticipation's weight. Nights before, we'd rehearse, separate arrivals, polite chats. But the too much wine loomed, blurring lines. Her worry mirrored mine, texts, sparse. Stay sharp. The test waited, proximity a double-edged blade, wine the temptress to our control. In quiet moments, her vulnerability surfaced, sharing stories of past hidings, drawing us closer in shared empathy. At her place, fire crackling low, she'd lean back on the rug, wine glass in hand, voice softening. Once, in my first big role, I loved a mentor. We hid for a year, stolen lunches, coded notes. Her words spilled slow, eyes on the flames, the past grit surfacing like silt stirred. It ended when rumors hit. She transferred. I buried it deep. Vulnerability cracked her shell. The stories raw. Nights of doubt. The isolation of closeted wants. I'd listen, hand on her knee, empathy bridging the space, my own hidings echoing hers. Feels familiar, I'd say, thumb tracing her skin, the shared weight lightening in the telling. Those moments drew us tighter, empathy a thread weaving through the fear, her past validating mine. In her arms, stories fading. We'd hold the quiet, closer for the truths unearthed. The pressure built to a breaking point, forcing us to confront the cost head-on. Rumors surfaced in a team email chain, veiled hints about unprofessional closeness, making the office air feel thicker, more oppressive. The thread started innocently enough. Updates on the holiday party, RSVPs, attachments of seating charts, but midway down, a comment from Mike in sales. Elena and our new star seemed joined at the hip lately. Late nights, paying dividends? Emojis followed, thumbs up and winks, but the words landed like dust, settling heavy on my desk. I scrolled back, heart thudding against my ribs. The screen's glow harsh in the afternoon light. Others chimed in lightly. Teamwork makes the dream work. But the undercurrent twisted in my gut, the office's recycled air suddenly stale. Pressing close. By the water cooler, whispers carried faint, heads turning as I passed, the plastic cup crinkling too loud in my grip. The chain grew, veiled jabs piling like silt, turning the open plan space into a cage, every keyboard click a potential echo of exposure. I deleted the email, but it lingered, the thickness choking the fluorescent hum, making each glance from colleagues feel like scrutiny. Elena caught my eye across the floor, her jaw tight, and I looked away, the weight doubling in the silence between us. She called me into her office after hours, door locked, her face pale as she showed me the anonymous note slipped under it. The building had emptied, shadows lengthening across the carpet as I knocked softly, her "come in" muffled through the wood. Inside, the lamp cast a warm pool on her desk, but her skin looked drained, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She locked the door with a click that echoed, turning to me with a folded paper in her hand, edges creased from her grip. "Found this today," she said, voice low, unfolding it to reveal typed words. "You're too close. Watch your step, or we'll make sure you both fall." No signature, just the threat stark on the page, her fingers trembling slightly as she held it out. The office air felt colder, vents whispering, and I took the note, the paper cool and thin, words blurring as my pulse roared. She paced to the window, arms crossed tight, the city lights starting to flicker on below. Her face in profile was pale against the glass, lines etched deeper. The vulnerability from our private nights now exposed in this shared dread. We stood there, the note between us like a fracture, the locked door no shield against what brewed outside. "We can't keep doing this," she said, voice cracking. But her hand reached for mine, contradicting every word. She stopped pacing, turning to face me, her eyes wet in the lamplight, the crack in her tone raw like gravel under tires. The words hung heavy, pulling at the ache we'd nurtured. But then her fingers sought mine, lacing tight, warm despite the chill in the room, her palm pressed against my skin, calluses rough from gripping pens and futures, the contradiction twisting deeper in my chest. I squeezed back, unable to let go, her touch a lifeline, even as her words sliced. The office clock ticked slow, marking the fracture, her breath uneven as she held my gaze. Can't... The word echoed my own fears, but her hand stayed, pulling me closer in silent defiance. The contradiction burned, her body language screaming what her voice tried to bury, the locked space amplifying the tension between us. I froze, the silt of fear settling in my chest, weighing the loss. My career, her position, the life we'd just begun to imagine. Her words rooted me in place, legs heavy, the fear thickening like silt after rain, clogging every breath. My career, years of reports and promotions, the respect I'd clawed for in meetings, hung by this thread, ready to snap under exposure. Her position, higher stakes, the department head role she'd earned through grit and guarded steps, now threatened by whispers turning to actions. And us. The imagined life. Mornings tangled in sheets without alarms, hands held openly, dissolved in that silt, weighing down the hope we'd stolen in shadows. I stood unmoving, her hand still in mine, the loss pressing like cold water rising, the office walls closing in with possibilities of empty desks and severed ties. The note lay forgotten on the desk, but its shadow loomed, the fear settling deep, making my limbs leaden, vision narrowing to her face. Tears came unbidden, her wiping them with a thumb rough from stress, the intimacy of it breaking me open. They welled hot, spilling over as the weight cracked something inside, silent at first, then a quiet sob escaping. She stepped closer, her free hand rising to my cheek, thumb brushing the track roughened by days of tension, calloused edge gentle against my skin. The wipe was slow, deliberate, her eyes locked on mine, the intimacy piercing through the fear like light through blinds. It broke me wider, the guarded walls crumbling in her touch, vulnerability spilling out in the quiet office. Her own eyes glistened, mirroring, the thumb lingering, tracing my jaw as if memorizing the shape. The roughness grounded me, stress-worn skin against my damp cheek, pulling me back from the edge. In that moment, alone behind the locked door, the break felt shared, her care, a bridge over the silt. We argued in hushed tones, the storm of consequences raging, but underneath the pull remained undeniable. Voices low to avoid echoing halls, words tumbling. "It's too dangerous," she hissed, hand still clasped. I countered. "But this, us, it's real," my whisper fierce, the consequences storming in my mind. HR probes, resignations, isolation. She pulled away slightly, gesturing to the note. "They'll destroy us both," her tone edged with panic, eyes flashing. The argument swirled, hushed barbs on risks and regrets, the office air thick with the rage of what-ifs. Yet, underneath, her fingers twitched toward mine, the pull magnetic, undeniable, drawing us back even mid-sentence. We circled the desk, voices overlapping in the dim, but the core held, that insistent tether, stronger than the storm. Breaths came ragged, the pull winning in stolen glances, the argument fading to exhausted sighs. In the face of ruin, we chose each other, stepping into the unknown together. The HR meeting came swiftly, her defending me with a steady voice while my hands trembled under the table. The summons arrived by email the next morning. Subject line neutral, but urgent. Immediate discussion required. We walked in together, side by side down the polished hall, but separated at the door, her to the head seat, me to the witness chair. The room smelled of fresh printouts and stale coffee, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm. The HR rep, a woman with clipped hair and a clipboard, laid out the complaints, anonymous tips, email chains, observations of inappropriate familiarity. Elena's voice cut through, steady as steel, recounting late nights as team necessities, my contributions vital to deadlines. She leaned forward, hands flat on the table, eyes fixed on the rep, defending not just the work, but us, her tone unyielding. Under the table, my fingers twisted in my lap, knuckles white, the tremor starting in my palms and climbing my arms. Sweat beaded at my neck, the air conditioner blasting cold against my flushed skin. She didn't look my way, but I felt her presence, an anchor in the storm of questions, fired at me. Late arrivals, closed doors, the note's shadow looming. My answers came halting, voice thin, hands shaking as I gripped the chair arms, wood slick under my grip. The meeting dragged, minutes stretching like hours, her steady defense a wall against the probing stares. When it ended, no immediate verdict, just pending review. But her nod to me as we left carried the weight of what we'd face next. The hall felt endless, footsteps echoing, my tremors easing only when her shoulder brushed mine briefly, hidden from view. We resigned together, her arm brushing mine as we packed boxes, the finality mixing with a strange relief. The decision came that night, over takeout in her apartment, the city rain pattering against the windows like hesitant applause. No more hiding the cost. The risks had caught up. The note, a spark to the powder keg we'd built. Letters drafted side by side on her laptop. Words formal. Appreciation for opportunities. Personal reasons for departure. The next day we submitted them, then returned to clear desks. The office, a ghost of itself mid-afternoon. Her arm grazed mine as we moved between cubicles. Cardboard boxes thudding soft on carpeted floors. I folded files. Photos of team retreats tucked away, the finality settling like dust on empty shelves. Colleagues hovered at edges, awkward goodbyes laced with questions, but we kept it brief, smiles tight. Her box filled with awards and planners, mine with notebooks, and a mug from that first shared coffee. The brush of her arm came again near the copier, deliberate in the emptying space, sending a quiet spark through the ache. Relief crept in strange waves. No more codes, no more minefields, but laced with the sting of lost ground. We carried boxes to the elevator, the ding marking the end, her presence beside me a steady warmth against the unknown. In the lot, rain slicked the pavement, but the weight lifted slightly, finality a door closing on the old life. Outside the building, on the rain-dampened steps, she took my hand openly. The world feeling vast and uncharted. The doors swung shut behind us, the corporate hum fading to the city's pulse, horns distant, pedestrians blurring under umbrellas. Rain misted the air, dampening our coats, steps slick underfoot as we paused at the edge. Her hand found mine then, fingers intertwining without glance or caution, palm warm against the chill. No shadows, no quick slips, just open. Her grip firm as if claiming the space between us. The world stretched out, sidewalks stretching to corners, skies gray and endless, the uncharted pull of what came next. I squeezed back, the damp seeping into my shoes, but her touch dried the fear, vastness no longer empty but full of her. We stood there, rain beating on her hair, the building looming behind like a shed skin. Passers-by moved on, unaware, but for us, the handhold marked the shift. Open air. Open us. The steps felt solid under the uncertainty, her thumb tracing my knuckle, the world reorienting around this simple act. Vast, yes, but shared. The uncharted, mapped by her beside me, rain washing away the last traces of secrecy. The first weeks were raw, job hunts, shared anxieties, but her presence grounded me, like flannel against skin after too long in silk. We crashed at her place, boxes stacked in corners, the apartment a temporary nest amid the chaos. Resumes flew out daily, screens glowing late into nights, rejections landing like punches to the gut, anxieties piled, bills ticking up, networks silent, the raw edge of starting over, scraping at confidence. I'd pace the kitchen, coffee cold in my mug, fears spilling. What if no one hires us now? What if the rumors follow? She'd pull me to the couch, her arms wrapping steady, the flannel of her shirt soft and worn against my cheek. After silk's smooth constraint, the office polish, the guarded touches, this grounded me. Rough texture, a reminder of real. Her presence filled the raw spaces, breaths sinking as we lay awake, anxieties voiced in the dark. Job fairs loomed, interviews rehearsed over breakfast, her hand on my knee during mock questions. The rawness stung. Sleepless nights, doubts grit, but her nearness buffered, flannel warmth chasing the silk-cold isolation. We leaned on each other, shared lists of openings, the grounding turning survival into something bearable. We rebuilt slowly, her laugh returning in our new shared space, the silence now full of possibility rather than secrets. Months in, we found a small rental together, walls bare at first, but ours, paint cans open, furniture pieced from sales. Job offers trickled, me at a startup, flexible hours, her consulting, remote from a home office nook. Rebuilding crept forward, resumes fading to routines, the space filling with our rhythms, morning runs, evening cooks. Her laugh came back tentative, then full, bubbling over a burned dinner or a silly story from the day. Low and warm, it echoed off the walls, chasing shadows from the corners we'd once hidden in. The silence shifted, no more weighted pauses, but easy gaps filled with plans, dreams voiced aloud. We hung photos, not of old teams, but us. Hikes, quiet nights. The space blooming with possibility. Her laugh sealed it, a sound reclaiming joy. The slow build turning tentative steps into a path forward. Empathy bridged the gaps, her understanding my fears as I did hers, turning isolation into strength. In quiet evenings, fears resurfaced, mine of instability, hers of judgment lingering, and we'd sit close, hands linked. She'd listen to my worries about the new role, eyes soft, nodding without rush, her own doubts shared in turn. Empathy flowed natural, her words wrapping my anxieties like a steady hand, mine easing her guarded edges. No more isolation's bite. Instead, strength woven from understanding, gaps bridged by shared truths. Her fears of past patterns repeating met my echoes, turning them to fuel, job talks laced with support, nights affirming choices. The empathy built us solid, isolation alchemized to resilience. Her knowing me as deeply as I knew her. What emerged was a hope we hadn't dared voice, solidifying in the quiet aftermath. Months later, in our own office, smaller, ours, she leaned across the desk, her smile unguarded, the air light with morning coffee. The space was cramped, a converted spare room in our rental, walls lined with mismatched shelves holding files and a few plants we'd salvaged from the old life. Sunlight slanted through the single window, warming the scarred wood of the desk we shared, her elbow nudging a mug as she reached for my hand. No fluorescent glare here, just the soft hum of our laptop fans and the distant traffic below. Her smile broke wide, no mask, teeth flashing in the light, the unguarded curve pulling me from my notes. Coffee steam curled between us, bitter and grounding, her fingers brushing mine mid-sentence on a client pitch. We'd built this from scraps, her consulting gigs, my freelance reports, tiny victories stacking like the papers on the desk. She leaned closer, breath warm across the space, the smaller office folding us together, no doors to lock or eyes to dodge. The air felt alive, laced with her shampoo and fresh grounds, the morning ritual a quiet claim on our days. No more hiding, our hands intertwined during calls, the thud of shared purpose replacing old fears. A video meeting flickered on the screen, voices droning from remote teams, but under the desk, her fingers laced with mine. Steady pressure anchoring the conversation. I'd speak on deliverables, her thumb tracing my knuckle, the thud of our shared rhythm syncing with my words. Old fears, exposure, loss, faded to echoes, replaced by this purpose, concrete as the keyboard clicks. Her grip tightened during tough questions, a silent, "I'm here," pulling us through the static and delays. Calls ended with her squeezing once, then releasing. But the connection lingered, hands-free yet marked by the touch. No coded taps or slipped holds. Just open, the thud building confidence, fears dissolving in the daily grind we owned. Afternoons blurred into joint reviews. Her chair scooted close, hands joining naturally over spreadsheets. Purpose, a steady pulse. The hiding's weight lifted, leaving space for this, uninterrupted, real. The office hours without apology. Reflections on those 6 months of silence brought gratitude, her whispering thanks for my patience in the dark. Evenings on the couch, feet tangled under a throw, we'd revisit the old days, voices low against the TV's murmur. Those months, the weighted glances, the unspoken ache, now surfaced as turning points, gratitude warming the words. She'd shift closer, head on my shoulder, whispering into the quiet, "You waited through it all, in that dark." Her voice roughened. Thanks laced with the grit of what we'd endured, her hand finding my knee in the dim. I'd nod, fingers combing her hair, the reflections stirring a deep pull. Silence, once heavy, now light with hindsight. Gratitude flowed both ways. Mine for her courage, the confession that cracked the walls, and it bound us tighter. Nights like that, whispers turning to kisses, the patience repaid in shared ease, dark yielding to this steady light. The 6 months shaped us, reflections a bridge from ruin to here, her thanks a soft echo in my ear. We planned ahead, her touch a constant reminder of the legacy we'd chosen over ruin. Weekends stretched lazy, calendars open on the table, her pen marking trips and goals amid coffee rings. A hike next month, her trail from years back, a conference where we'd go openly, hands linked in crowds. Her touch came constant, arm around my waist during talks, fingers grazing my neck as she pointed to dates. It reminded me, each brush, of the choice. Legacy over the corporate cage, ruin traded for this freedom. We sketched futures, expanding the office, maybe a joint venture. The plans solidifying like drying ink, her palm flat on my back during a serious note. The touch grounding, legacy feeling tangible in her warmth. No rush, just steady steps, her reminders weaving through the days, chosen path, clear in every contact. Ruin's shadow faded, legacy blooming in the plans, her nearness, the thread holding it all. The community we found, other women like us, offered validation, turning personal risk into collective strength. It started small, a local meetup through an app, her hand in mine as we entered the cafe. Voices overlapping in welcome. Women gathered, stories of hidden loves, workplace battles, mirroring our own, nods passing like shared secrets. Validation hit deep, their laughs easing doubts, risks we'd taken echoed in tales of quits and comebacks. One evening, a circle on worn chairs, she squeezed my hand during a confession much like ours, strength rippling through. Personal became collective. Our story one thread in the weave, validation turning isolation to belonging. We hosted later, our living room filled, coffee brewing as voices rose, strength built in the exchange. Her eyes met mine across the group. The community a bolster, risks alchemized to power shared. Nights after, debriefs on the couch, the validation lingered, collective force lifting us higher. In her arms at night, the world felt right. The pull now a steady current carrying us forward. Bedroom dark, sheets cool at first, then warming as she drew me close, arms wrapping firm around my waist. The pull, once insistent and fraught, flowed steady now, a current pulling us into sleep without tension. Her breath even against my neck, legs entwined, the world outside irrelevant in that hold. Rightness settled deep, bones to bones, the current gentle but sure, carrying dreams of tomorrows. No storms, just this. Her chin tucked to my shoulder, pulse sinking slow. Forward felt natural, the pull guiding without force, arms a harbor after the chaos. Sleep came easy, world aligned in her embrace, steady current, the new normal. Looking back, that silence led here, to a love worth every risk. Her hand in mine now feels like home, the silence broken forever. If this resonated with you, subscribe to join more stories of authentic connections. Share in the comments. Have you ever risked it all for love?